Coming up today marks 2 years since the devastating July unrest that took place in KwaZulu-Natal and some parts of Gauteng. Johannesburg Water has urged the city's residents to stock up on water ahead of supply shutdown. And United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres condemns the airstrike that reportedly killed at least 22 people in Sudan. Good afternoon. We're coming to you live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you for tuning in. You're watching The Week Ahead. I'm your host, Mfundo Mabalana. You can actually interact with us on our social media platforms. It's at Week Ahead, and our hashtag is The Week Ahead. The economic loss that Durban and Gauteng suffered after the July unrest 2 years ago has been described as shattering. A joint survey by the Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Durban Municipality total losses to business in the city at a staggering 75 billion rand. This included the value of sales and stock loss, damage to property, the loss of equipment as well as machinery. The survey found that 16,000 businesses were affected and 9,000 jobs were at stake. More than 300 people died during the looting and violence.
Shortly before a midnight deadline on the 7th of July, Zuma left his homestead in Nkandla in a convoy of cars to hand himself over to authorities. He was to serve his 15-month prison sentence handed to him by the Constitutional Court for contempt of court. The conviction followed Zuma's defiance of an instruction to appear before the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into State Capture to answer to allegations of high-level corruption during his time in office. Prison authorities later confirmed that Zuma was incarcerated at the Escort Correctional Centre in KwaZulu-Natal. 2 days after his incarceration, the Pietermaritzburg High Court dismissed Zuma's application to overturn his prison sentence, ruling that a lower court couldn't overturn a decision made by the Apex Court. Zuma's rescission applications to the Constitutional Court were still to be heard the following week. Meanwhile, numerous posts on social media encouraged protests, including attacks on highways and retail centres in support of Zuma. On the evening of the 9th of July, protesters blockaded the N3 highway and torched at least 20 trucks and looted shops in the Mooi River area. Protesters later closed the N3 and N2 highways, which affected the transportation of goods from Durban and Richards Bay to the industrial hub of Johannesburg and Cape Town. The unrest spread within KwaZulu-Natal. Shopping malls and centres were ransacked by mobs who took food, electronic goods, clothes and liquor. Attacks on retail centres also spread inland to Gauteng. In Durban and Pietermaritzburg, crowds of looters attacked warehouses and set alight several buildings and factories. The looting and violence forced multiple businesses and retailers to close. While initially the protest appeared to have been in support of calls for the release of Zuma, the situation later degenerated into acts of criminality. Government called for calm amidst growing threats to shut down the province. The outnumbered and under-resourced police force failed to quell the wanton looting and destruction. As a result, private security companies, armed civilians and vigilante groups took on law enforcement duties by protecting businesses and communities from rioting and looting.
We've got our own neighborhood to watch there as well. We've been sitting out whole day, whole night. As I'm standing here, just came from our night shift, straight here to come and get some food and stuff because we really need this. It's terrible what's happening out there.
This stoked racial tensions between black and Indian South Africans in Phoenix, north of Durban. The area, with a majority of Indian residents, armed themselves to fight off looters, and several racially motivated attacks and killings reportedly took place. The majority of the more than 300 fatalities were attributed to stampedes during the looting sprees. Both the Durban and Richards Bay ports ceased operations. Damage to transport infrastructure caused fuel and food shortages, which led to queues outside petrol stations and grocery stores.
It is a scramble for essentials. Here where we are, people are having to use cards only because they're not accepting cash. And people are going to be only taking 20 items per person. So when we heard yesterday that people shouldn't worry about food security and everything because there's enough, it doesn't make sense. Where is it going to come from?
The harvesting and distribution of fresh produce were interrupted. The supply of medicine was disrupted and the COVID-19 vaccine rollout program was affected, while the country was still battling the third wave of infections. Government grants and pension payouts were also affected. On the 12th of July, the South African National Defence Force was deployed to help restore calm. And on the same day, the Constitutional Court dismissed Zuma's application to rescind the ruling to imprison him. More than 2,000 people were arrested in the province. After about 10 days of unrest, government started to count the losses. More than 200 shopping centres suffered looting or damage, 100 of which were subjected to arson attacks. More than 160 liquor outlets and distributors were damaged. ATMs, pharmacies, banks and post offices were vandalised. 40,000 businesses and 50,000 traders were affected. And 150,000 jobs were stated to be at risk. Renee Heine, SABC News, Durban.
Now, today marks 2 years since the devastating July unrest that took place in KwaZulu-Natal and some parts of Gauteng. This was allegedly as a result of the Constitutional Court's order that former President Jacob Zuma be arrested and directly imprisoned. KwaMashu in KwaZulu-Natal became the epicenter of the riots that saw shops and factories, including malls, looted over several days. Now, for more on this, we're joined by political analyst Dr. Levi Ndo. Doctor, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your time. So it's 2 years to the day. Beyond the state security deficiencies which were highlighted post the protest, many analysts spoke of a need to address the underlying socio-political and economic issues that saw people join in to loot and destroy infrastructure without hesitation. Yes, of course, the economic issues are still there, but do you believe there's been a genuine effort to address these issues now?
Good afternoon, Fundo. Good afternoon to the viewers at home. Well, of course, the security issue becomes very central. And the unfortunate part is that it appears as if it's going to be a problem that we're going to stay with for quite some time. It is also evident that there is a lot of talk to deal with socio-economic issues in the country. But the reality on the ground is that we don't see the results of such happening. For an example, we talk about issues relating to income, issues relating to the gap between the rich and the poor. That has not been as yet addressed. We talk about issues that relates to unemployment, for an example, which has been cited by a lot of people that participated in the riots to say that we are poor, we are unemployed, and we cannot survive. As we sit now, we have got a very high rate of unemployment in South Africa, which is actually affecting young people. So the socio-economic conditions in the country, as we speak today, has not changed in a manner that people would say we are actually making strides, unfortunately.
So does that mean we're, in fact, at a more vulnerable or in a more vulnerable position now as a country, that any slight political instability or activity could see people do exactly what they did 2 years ago?
Unfortunately, that is the case. We're seeing people who are trying to earn a living through illegal means. If indeed there was a way in which the government is able to deal with issues of unemployment, we wouldn't be having the situation that happened in Boksburg. We wouldn't be having zamazamas. So many people are actually taking options on other means for survival. My sense is that we need government to come together, business and as civil society in general, to ensure that much better strategies that are implementable are actually being utilized so that we get out of this situation.
But on the side of the state security apparatus, though, it seems there has been somewhat of an effort post those riots. An example being what we saw with the EFF protest or national shutdown. We saw the army being brought in days in advance. Is this, though, the best solution, where security is strengthened while the issues that take communities to the streets are not meaningfully addressed?
I think in South Africa, you need an effort in which different departments are actually brought together and they actually work together in a manner that is properly coordinated. If you look at the situation that relates to security, there are many factors that require security personnel and the police to participate onto, but other departments and other factors would actually prevent the security personnel to be able to exercise their responsibilities well. I want to cite an example of what happened in Boksburg. You still have, and also in Diepsloot, you have a situation where police officers will come up very openly and say, we're unable to deal with criminal activities in Diepsloot and in Boksburg because it is difficult to walk in those areas. We cannot access some of the areas there. That therefore requires the department that is dealing with settlement to ensure that people are properly placed in areas where the police are able to do their work. You have got a situation where illegal miners are actually doing mining, and there are people who appear to be benefiting out of this illegal mining. So you require an effort in which different departments are supposed to work together.
So it's supposed to be a multi-pronged approach if we are to ever deal with issues such as what we saw with the riots. But if we look at the politics of everything, the ANC was also criticized for its handling of the whole matter. Some commentators actually attributed this to factionalism, saying it prevented those opposed to former President Zuma from appreciating at the time that at the very least in his home province, he actually wielded a level of power or influence that would have warranted some sort of an intervention, be it political leaders going down to KZN to sensitize the comrades on just the legal process that led to his incarceration.
At least we have learned from this exercise that when you have got a governing party that is in charge of the administration of the state and there is instability in the governing party, the possibilities that such will spread to ordinary citizens. It is also a lesson for the ANC that factionalism and disunity has the potential to spread outside the ANC to the entire population. But at the same time, government led by the ANC has the responsibility to deal with socio-economic issues affecting South Africa so that citizens shouldn't have to have the reasons to participate in the activities that they participated into 2 years ago, because they'll be employed and these people will be able to survive on their own.
But I'm sure when we observed the discourse around that period, there was also another perspective on the dangers just of seeking a political solution, because we heard of the political solution so often, just that phrase. They said that there are dangers in seeking a political solution for the former president, suggesting that it could have fed into that destructive politics of personalities, where now you're going to elevate a particular political person and want to seek an alternative solution for them and them alone.
It was a situation that could not be avoided. Of course, there are people who raised issues relating to having a political solution. And I think people who raised this matter are people who wanted to ensure that such does not happen. But the unfortunate part is that in South Africa, we have a constitution, we adhere to the rule of law, and all citizens are equal before the law in South Africa. So there was no way we were going to avoid that. What, in my view, we should do is to try our best in whatever positions that we occupy to actually ensure that we don't break the laws, because if we do, we just have to face the consequences.
And then just in closing, we keep hearing of greater disengagement from mainstream politics in the near future. Actually, Julius Malema touched on this in his briefing this week. What are the dangers, if any, of this erosion of trust in political leadership being left as it is currently?
Well, it has got its own implications. Already, there is a bill that has been passed in Parliament that talks about individuals having to contest elections on their own. The way in which politicians in South Africa appears to be disappointing citizens and losing trust on the general public, it's one issue in which people will have other options and look at independent candidates. Politicians who are not trusted by people, who are unethical, or who behave in a manner that is not consistent with the Constitution would actually frustrate ordinary citizens, and they'll have to look for other options outside politics.
Dr. Ndo, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, as always. That was a political analyst, Dr. Levi Ndo. More news on the other side of this break. Do stay with us.
We may come from different communities, speak different languages, chase different dreams, but we are all connected. Our banknotes and coins celebrate this connection as we bond as families, support our communities, and boost the economy. The South African Reserve Bank has added new designs celebrating our heritage and upgraded the security features. Your trusted rands with the latest designs or the older ones are worth the same. So go on, use both with confidence. Our money, our pride. The SA Reserve Bank, connecting us. To learn more, download the Solve Currency app or visit our website at resbank.co.za.
The powerful craft their messages carefully. But what's the true state of our nation? This is where truth and facts are uncovered. A new platform for fed-up South Africans, where no topic is untouchable. 1 hour of thought-provoking current affairs. Unfiltered news, unfiltered views, unfiltered conversations. With me, Sizwe Mpofu Walsh, on SABC News Channel 404. SABC News, independent, impartial.
Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, Johannesburg Water has urged the city's residents to stock up on water ahead of the supply shutdown. The water outage will affect areas including Roodepoort, Randburg, Soweto, Southdale, Ennerdale and Joburg Central. It will start on Tuesday evening and continue until Friday due to maintenance of infrastructure. The water utility has called on residents not to panic. The Eastern Cape province is struggling to provide enough water and sanitation services to residents due to poor maintenance and vandalism of bulk water infrastructure. The failure of municipalities to spend conditional grants for bulk water supply projects is making the situation worse.
Access to clean drinking water, a fundamental human right, but sustainable safe drinking water supply is a challenge for many municipalities in the Eastern Cape. Residents say a lack of infrastructure maintenance contribute immensely to the problem.
I don't think the water that we are drinking here is safe. It's not healthy for human beings. We're gonna get diseases like stomach aches because of this water.
After several means of trying to unblock this drain, it has been a terrible thing to us because all the waste of that site and that site comes and block here. Me and my neighbor, after rain, even if it's a small rain, we have to clean masses of bad things like napkins, condoms, everything we have to clean.
Authorities say illegal water connections are also another contributing factor to water scarcity.
In many rural areas, it is because of illegal connections. Remember, the systems were designed for each and every household to have access to a tap, a street tap that is 200 meters away. So a household should not travel more than 200 meters. But now we see mentions in rural villages, people have illegally connected. That has tampered with the system, and the pressure of the pipes is no longer able to carry the water to where it's supposed to.
Kokta says support systems are in place to assist municipalities struggling to spend water projects budget.
The strategy already identifies those who are going slow, and we are there now to try and support them in order to improve. Once you improve spending, you can allow water access to the whole of the province, because without us spending those funds, the communities will remain without water services. And this meeting was actually looking at all those areas of challenges.
Communities have been urged to use water sparingly and report any leakages in water systems. Lubabalo Tata, SABC News, Eastern Cape.
All right, let's shift our focus to this story now. The South African Weather Service is warning that an intense cold front is expected to sweep across the country. SA Weather Services is also warning of possible snowfall in Sutherland area in the Northern Cape. The Cape Metro is already experiencing intermittent rainfall and strong winds, very cold, wet and windy conditions across the Western Cape. KwaZulu-Natal residents are urged to be cautious, especially those in coastal areas, as its forecast cold front is expected to also be accompanied by heavy rainfall in the province this weekend. 2 weeks ago, 7 people lost their lives and 151 were left destitute after storm winds wreaked havoc in Inanda, north of Durban.
The effects of the torrential rains accompanied by strong winds are still visible here. 58-year-old Sibongile Mhlungu was one of the people left homeless after the storms in the Amauti area of Inanda late last month. She was alone when her house was struck. She's been forced to seek refuge in her son's bedroom. The unemployed mother of 2 says she doesn't have a source of income to rebuild her structure. The weather warning has brought about renewed anxiety for these residents who have not yet recovered.
We have a feeling that we might not get assistance from government, as some people who were affected by floods previously have not received assistance. We might get help by 2030. We don't think we can get assistance before people who were affected before us.
Just a stone's throw away from Mhlungu's homestead, the Twala family is facing the same difficulties. The family of 7 shares this one room. While some families here say they have been given food parcels, others say they haven't been as lucky. He says government registered their names. He says they were promised vouchers, blankets and other essentials, including building materials. He says later he was told that his name was not in the register. The Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs says disaster management teams remain on high alert following a weather warning from the South African Weather Service. The department says coastal areas in the province must brace themselves for more heavy rains this weekend.
We have activated our disaster management team, and also I must add, apart from the thunder showers, there is also a snow expected in the Drakensberg mountain. So we have activated our disaster management team to be on standby to respond to any accident that may arise with this weather condition that is expected over the weekend.
Meanwhile, the department says the search for 6 missing people following last month's storms is still underway. Vusi Kumalo, SABC News, Durban.
All right, more news on the other side of this break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now let's shift our focus to our roads now. Following the torching of trucks this morning, the N3 at Van Riene's Pass, where 6 trucks were torched earlier this morning, has now been opened. Police are on high alert, manning some of the off-ramps along the N3 routes. Several trucks that have opted to be off the N3 are parked at various truck shops. Our reporter Vusi Kumalo has more.
Yes, according to the information that we got from the police, is that a group of armed men who were told that they were armed to the teeth then stopped about 6 trucks as they were about maneuvering this steep bend. They were then stopped by this group of men who demanded that they be they disembark from their trucks. We're told that they're also carrying those guns and also petrol. They then doused it and on those trucks, and then those trucks then bent. No injuries were reported. That's what we got from the police. They also got a few cartridges on the floor, on the road here. This forms part of the police investigation into the matter. At the moment, no one has been arrested yet, but police are saying they are also following up on the leads. As I'm stepping out of the shot, so that Siso Tembe will show you one of the 6 trucks that has been set alight. Currently, there are recovery as well as the cleanup operations or efforts that are taking place. So this is a truck that was carrying fish from the Durban harbour to Gauteng. As you know, that the N3 is one of the main or strategic transport node in South Africa, connecting or linking 2 economic hubs. That is the Durban as well as South Africa's biggest economic hub, that is Johannesburg. So they were then stopped, and then we're told that no one has been arrested as yet. So this is one of the trucks that is now mangled. This is a wreckage of the trucks, forming 6 of the trucks that were burnt or set alight here at Van Rienen's Pass. At that moment, at around about 12, trucks and also some other cars were being diverted at the N3 near the Escort exits. That's where the traffic coming from Durban are being diverted, but at the moment there's a lot of traffic that is currently at standstill at the top of Van Rienen's as you are coming from Johannesburg using the southbound lane. At around about 1, the spokesperson for the traffic inspectorate in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, Zinhle Mngomezulu, did say that by then they will have been able to open at least 1 lane so that they will be able to move, the traffic will be able to move using that lane. And obviously there will be traffic personnel who will be standing by and also manning this road in order to ensure that it is also safe, especially for the truckers who are using this route on a daily basis, whom we did speak to. They did also raised the concerns about using the N3 route, saying it's very risky, and they feel as if they are being targeted by some of the people who are allegedly wanting the employment of locals in the trucking industry, because it has been a long-standing issue of the trucks that are being burnt or satellites here because of this long-standing issue of the employment of the foreign nationals in the trucking industry. So at the moment, that's what we can tell you, but police are also investigating on the matter. No one has been arrested yet.
Concerned Jabong residents in Welkom are demanding more police visibility in the area. That's after 7 people were shot at a local tavern, with one of those losing his life. So far, 2 suspects have been arrested in connection with that shooting, while 2 others are still at large. A group of men in the community have now formed an organization to fight increasing gangsterism in the area.
Concerned about the safety of their loved ones as crime incidents keep escalating in the area. Gangsterism has afflicted the unemployed youth, targeting residents and local foreign-owned businesses. 2 weeks ago, these residents decided to take a stand against the criminality by confronting any crime incident that transpires. However, they feel limited protecting their community, highlighting that they are unable to punish the culprits as they can't take the law into their own hands.
bothata ba mona na go re ke botlokotsebe bo jileng sitse ka ga sebaka sena sa rona sa streeting because of ke nana ga tlhokego ya mesebetsi ke yona e nngwe le go nyaneng ke challenge ka ga batjha ba rona ka mona na so and then batho ba dula ba le matswalong hape hape nna ke mongwe le go nyaneng ke la ka bona botlokotsebe bo ne bo etsahala and then le batho ba bambe le go nyaneng re la ranka bohato ba re ikopanye le bona because ntwe e ama moahi wa le mong e re ama ka go tlolwa re le baahi injury to one injury to all ke yona le baka la gore re fumane sebaka sena na e le sephuthulileng for moahi o mong le mong a dulang ka mona na o sa kgathaletse gore ke moahi ya tswang ka ntle kapa ke moahi wa mona na.
For over 2 decades, the area has always been affected by gangsterism. Residents believe it passes from generation to generation. They've now had enough of the volatile situations they're subjected to.
Botlokotsebe bona no bo etsala mtshare re bo shebile bo etsa ha itsa hangata wa bona jwale ra bona o raiko o tla tloela o re ha bo etsa le wena bo qetelle bo tlo etsa la wena.
The problem that we are facing with the police, by the time we contact them, they took their time in order to reach our destination. They delay. By the time the crime scene is gone, is when they reach our destination. They took almost 4 hours before they reach our destination.
Na jwale ka moruti ke re ba wariti ka bana bokamoso ba bona ba ngwana o affecte ya fela so re tlo katela re sena youth ya ka usana ba ni tlo ba le ya le dikereke so e re tshwenya haholo especially jwale ka baruti le batho ba kenang dikereke ka fela.
The Community Policing Forum started being active in the area earlier this year. They admit that they are not doing enough for the community. With only 8 members available, they feel they are limited and don't receive enough support from the police. The self-appointed structure of the concerned men has also been cautioned.
We travel on my presence, chairman ya sector, then Jitoba Famula, unlike Winkela Mulamazo, which is crime with my crime. Tracing one Kausani, who please all abona barre, Generalonsa crime, but now Mula also Sararuna. Non to give mob justice to the locative. The end up at the Kenya Nabazwadi. TAT, whereby to Sabana.
Recognized structure like CPF knows very well what must they do if they feel like they are not receiving enough support from the South African Police Service. The station commander, there are community police officers within each police station. Those are the people they must liaise with. But this matter will be brought under the attention of the station commander as well. Problem is vigilantism start there, and we don't encourage it because at the end of the day, they will find themselves behind bars because they will take life, they will act illegally, they will immediately on the other side also harass people because they are not working with the police. But the structures which are recognized like CPF, they work from time to time with the police under the guidance of the police. They don't work independently without the police being there in the area.
Police revealed that there is a mobile police station that rotates around the area.
The visibility of police, I think the community in the area can bear testimony that especially when it comes to weekends. We start from Thursday already, we start with our operation to saturate the areas where we know that this type of incidents take place.
Police say building a police station will be a long-term process and have also appealed to tavern owners to prioritize security of their patrons. Refile Mekwa, SABC News, welcome.
South Africa is having a huge challenge of the construction mafia. Many people have been victims of these scams where they're collecting money from those who have won tenders from government. The Minister of Human Settlements, that's Mamoloko Kubai, who's the ANC chair of the Subcommittee on Economic Transformation, says the law enforcement agencies must do its work and has dismissed reports that an MEC in KwaZulu-Natal was intending to meet with these construction mafias.
When I saw the matter as well, I was concerned as in my capacity as minister, but also as chair of ETC, because we do understand the impact that the construction mafia are doing on the economy, and we've called for the law enforcement agencies to be able to deal with them. So criminal activities can be in a way of negotiating. The explanation I got was that it was not for a broader negotiation. It was a particular project that was stopped, and the MEC went to intervene in that particular project. One, to understand what was the problem, what caused the delay. Is it a legitimate issue around your localization? As you know, that most of the time when a big contract has been awarded, there will be SMMEs that comes in to benefit in terms of the value chain and local employment that is being done. So that was the main aim, to go and ascertain the issues, because definitely we are not going to, as government, we can't encourage negotiations with people who are actually going into sites and demanding percentage of money, even without lifting a finger into it. That is completely out. What has been raised with us, obviously, previously and continuously, it's around us as government ensuring that the issues of set aside are being implemented, because it's a major issue, and that's why part of the work that we've been doing as ETC was to ensure that we push for the issue of public procurement bill that has been concluded in Cabinet through Minister of Finance, that will assist in terms of legally ensuring that in areas where we require the set aside for women, for young people, those are implemented within the legal framework. We do condemn acts of disruption of projects, because they deny people, for example, if you disrupt a housing project, you are denying people access to homes, you're denying people access to roads. Infrastructure creates jobs, but also ensures that they contribute in terms of economic development. So that's why we can never, ever, as government or even as ANC, encourage anyone who says that we will go and negotiate. There isn't a negotiation, and that's the explanation I got from the MEC, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal. But we must acknowledge that this is a major issue. We continue to raise it with the security cluster.
Dalton Hostel dwellers in eThekwini claim the lack of inspection of buildings and infrastructure is to blame for the decay and unhygienic conditions they live under. They also allege the mushrooming of shacks in the hostel's vicinity breeds crime. Durban has 12 hostels and a sizable population of hostel dwellers.
Durban hostels, notorious dungeons said to be breeding grounds for contract killings. They were originally built around the city to accommodate male migrant workers, but have now been converted into family units. The Dalton Hostel was originally set up for 1,500 beds, but its population has since tripled. Residents have raised several concerns ranging from overcrowding, water leakages and crime to poor management of infrastructure. They say their facility is decaying due to neglect by the municipality.
Lack of inspection.
Lack of inspection is crucial from top municipal management right to the bottom. The municipal hostel supervisors are the ones responsible for ensuring that inspections of the hostel buildings and infrastructure are still in place. It is indeed true that in most hostels vicinities there are shacks mushrooming all over the place.
He says people were left destitute after the floods. He says there are women and children who are staying in an exposed building with only a rooftop. He says they then requested assistance from the municipality, but to no avail. Women and children who live in hostels say they find it difficult to access amenities for health services and education.
We have children, yet we don't have clinics and early childhood development centers. When our children are sickly, we cannot take them to the nearby King Edward Hospital because we are being turned away in order to go to Wentworth Hospital.
eThekwini authorities say non-payment of services by the dwellers, including a 43 rand rental and illegal elements running hostels, hinder service delivery.
There are superintendents that are meant to be overseeing the hostels, but their role has been overtaken by some illegal characters in our hostels, which then places their lives at risk and makes it very difficult for them to do their jobs adequately. The issue of mushrooming of shacks is an issue that is plaguing eThekwini and other metros all over the country. So that Dalton area is not immune to the problem of shacks mushrooming.
The municipality says the Dalton Hostel is set for 100 million rand upgrade over the next 3 years. Vusi Khumalo, SABC News, Durban.
Alleged Parliament arsonist Zandile Mafia is expected to appear in court on the 13th of July. The High Court in Cape Town has ordered that the psychiatric report on Mafia not be disclosed at this point. Mafia was sent for mental evaluation at the Fort England Psychiatric Hospital in the Eastern Cape. The court gave Mafia's defence a month to consult with their client following the evaluation period. All right, more news on the other side. Do stay with us. Welcome back. The Art EC Gallery in Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape has been around for over a century and has put the spotlight on great artists like George Mpemba, among others. However, due to a drop in art sales and rising prices, the gallery only has enough funds to run until the end of July. Mcebisi Slingile has the story.
The gallery was founded in 1918 under the name the Eastern Province Society of Arts and Craft. Young men who came from the First World War expressed their trauma through art. Here is where they would eventually exhibit their work. But this gallery may not see its 104th exhibition in September.
Funding is still very generous, but things have become very expensive. And we just can't get through the month. We also find that overheads are becoming very expensive. We now have a water problem because of all the vandalism to the building in the last 2 years. And recently a leak burst through the foundation slab at the back. So we have constant water running. And then the sale of artwork has dropped drastically since COVID. It's very hard to sell art, which is heartbreaking for the artists. So we have to find other ways to encourage them to make the comments that an area needs so desperately by the artists.
88-year-old Derek Erasmus exhibits his work at this gallery, possibly for the last time on this wall before it goes back to storage. He had his first encounter with art tech in 1977. And it was through this institution that he built a name for himself.
When you talk about art, you're not only talking about the artist's enjoyment in creating a work of art. What happens is when a person looks at a work of art, they are reliving what the artist did. It's a spiritual thing. I was talking to my wife earlier. Art doesn't serve a practical purpose. It's not like a spade that you can dig a hole, not like a car that you can drive from A to B. What it does is it does things for people spiritually. If art were to die out and there were no longer any art, people would start dying spiritually.
On the library side of the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan Museum is information and publications on the first 100 years of art tech.
A combination of concern around the old building and leaks and perhaps the documents not being as safe in that space, and also recognizing that maybe the sort of history is here in the museum and that art tech is a kind of a living space, so there was a shift of the archive to this space. Also, the museum and art tech have a very long history. We owe our existence to the artists who started art tech. It was the group of creatives 100 years ago who agitated to the council then that a museum should exist, and so we will always have a very strong relationship with that, with the institution.
Up-and-coming artists feel that closure of the art tech would deprive them of a chance to showcase their work.
Art tech galleries like bringing a spotlight to our pieces, and also the opportunities to showcase your work. It doesn't matter if it's not bought, but for your work to be out there just means a lot, man.
It allows a lot of space for up-and-coming artists, especially new artists who haven't shown work anywhere. So you'd find if you go to another art gallery and you want to exhibit something, they're gonna say, have you exhibited somewhere? Or they'll just tell you have to have had an exhibition somewhere before then.
I feel it's quite important to also not only have social media be the front runner, but also have the physical realm also speak for itself. Because even though we're moving now towards a digital space that is very crucial and rapidly growing, I feel we might just lose the old essence of coming to a gallery in a space where all of us share the same interests and same passion about art.
AdTech still keeps its doors open, hoping for some sales or assistance in keeping history going. SABC News in Kaber.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on African leaders to take the integration of the African continent seriously. This weekend, the AU is commemorating the African Integration Day. President Ramaphosa says the recent COVID-19 pandemic, war in Ukraine and the global economic crisis have affected the continent, and it is important for African countries to work together to address these challenges.
The past 3 years have taught us all valuable lessons about why deepening African integration is perhaps the most urgent task of our time. The COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Europe, and the associated health and economic crises have taught us that Africa's vulnerabilities can only be solved by Africans and their governments taking our destiny into our own hands as Africans. Even more important, these events taught us that we must take integration seriously, because our vulnerabilities and problems are integrated. Our solutions must therefore be integrated and coordinated by ourselves as Africans. Consider, for example, the way countries of the global north treated us with vaccine apartheid at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. That happened because we did not have our own destinies in our own hands. That should never be allowed to happen again. That is why I'm proud to see that efforts are underway by various African nations and the AU to build our own vaccine manufacturing capacities and associated regional supply chains. The Partnerships for African Vaccine Manufacturing, which was established by the African Union under the Africa CDC, has set a bold target for the continent. It aims to enable African vaccine manufacturing industry to develop, to produce, and to supply over 60% of the total vaccine doses required on the continent by 2040, up from less than 1%. This will represent real progress on our continent. I urge African Union member states, African manufacturers, national regulatory agencies and partners to do all they can to ensure we succeed on this very important mandate. However, our efforts should not end at vaccine manufacturing. More broadly, we must aspire to continuously invest in our post-pandemic resilience building across multiple levels of health systems, as well as economic and financial systems. For that to truly materialize, it will take innovative and intentional public-private partnerships to succeed. We can only succeed if we integrate and synergize the efforts of the public and private sectors while we carry along partners in civil society and the international community.
United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has condemned the airstrike that reportedly killed many people in Sudan. At least 22 people were killed and scores injured in an airstrike by Sudan's army on western Omdurman city as the war between the country's military factions enters its 12th week. Guterres reiterated his call for the Sudanese armed forces and its rival rapid support forces to cease fighting and commit to a durable cessation of hostilities. And that's where we leave it for today. We're back next week. Take care.